Sometimes a single decision can send shockwaves across the entire globe. And that's exactly what we're talking about today, the fallout from the United States leaving the World Health Organization. This wasn't just some headline. It triggered a massive funding crisis and totally realigned global power. So let's really dig in and see what a world without the US and the WHO actually looks like. And it all started with this one sentence, right here. This wasn't some idle threat or, a talking point. Nope. This was the official declaration from the White House. It made the U.S. exit a done deal. And, well, it set the stage for everything we're about to cover. Okay, so how did we even get to this point? Think of it as the first domino to fall. We're going to look at the timeline and the official reasons the administration gave for pulling out. Yeah, this decision really didn't just happen overnight. It was the culmination of this multi-year back-and-forth policy battle. You can see it right here on the timeline. First, the notice to withdraw back in July 2020, then a complete reversal in January 2021, which kept the U.S. in. And then, bam, the final decisive executive order on January 20th, 2025 that sealed the deal. So what was the official reason? Why did this happen? Well, the administration put it all under the banner of an America First global health strategy, and they laid out a few key points. They cited the WHO's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, they said it failed to make urgently needed reforms, and they felt it wasn't independent from political influence. And of course, a big one was the argument that the U.S. was paying an unfairly large share compared to other countries. And the second the U.S. was out, the WHO was plunged into a massive crisis. We're talking about a financial black hole. Let's look at the numbers, because they really tell the story of the leadership vacuum that was created. Instantly, just like that, the WHO was staring down this number, a 1.9 times billion-dollar hole in its upcoming budget. I mean, this isn't a small gap you can just patch up with some spare change. It's a canyon. And to put that into perspective for you, that 1.9 billion, that's almost 45% of the entire budget the organization needs to function. Just think about that. Can you imagine trying to run anything, a business, a charity, anything, when nearly half your money disappears overnight? And it gets worse. On top of that huge gap in future funding, there was an immediate problem. The U.S. still owed $260 million in back dues for 2024 and 2025. So bam, instant cash crisis. And this is where it hits home for the people inside the organization. To deal with this financial shock, the WHO had to announce cuts. We're talking about nearly 2,400 jobs, globally. That's a quarter of their entire team. Gone. You know what they say, nature abhors a vacuum. And a power vacuum this big? Well, it doesn't stay empty for long. As the U.S. stepped away, another major global player saw a huge opportunity to step up. And look at this. This chart really drives the point home. The U.S. wasn't just another donor. It was, historically, the biggest government funder by a mile. They were paying for everything from the WHO's core operations to really specific critical programs like wiping out polio and responding to emergencies. So with the U.S. creating this massive $1.9 billion void, China moved in, and fast. Beijing stepped up and pledged $500 million. A really strategic move that instantly set them up to become the WHO's new #1 state backer. Now, here's the key thing to understand. This isn't just about the money. Not at all. Analysts have a term for this, a geopolitical premium. See, China isn't just plugging a hole in a budget. It's seizing a strategic advantage. When a major power, like the U.S., steps back from a global institution, it leaves an opening. And this was a clear, direct play for more influence on the world stage. Okay, so we've talked about the high-level politics and the money, but what does all of this mean for actual people, on the ground? Because believe me, there are very real, very human consequences. This number really shows what's at stake. According to one estimate, the global health aid from the U.S., a lot of which flowed through organizations like the WHO, was saving somewhere between 2 and 6 million lives every single year. So these funding cuts immediately put all these critical programs in jeopardy. I mean, we're talking about decades of hard-won progress in the fight against TB, polio, HIV/AIDS, all at risk. But it also hits things like essential reproductive health services, and this one is so important, the worldwide system we have for spotting the next pandemic. And we're already starting to see projections of the human cost. Get this. One analysis just looked at the impact on a single disease, tuberculosis, And the conclusion was staggering: an estimated 420,500 extra deaths from TB alone by 2035. And here's another heartbreaking projection, this time on women's health. The Guttmacher Institute did the math and figured out that by cutting off this funding, more than 8,300 women will likely die from things that are totally preventable, complications during pregnancy and childbirth. All right, so the US is out. The immediate impact is pretty clear. But this story is far from over. So what should we be watching for? What's going to shape the future of global health now? Well, analysts are pointing to three big questions we need to keep an eye on. First, U.S. politics. Is it possible a new administration or a new Congress could change course and re-engage? Second, China's money. Will that $500 million pledge actually be delivered, on time and in full? And third, and maybe most importantly, how effective will the WHO be now? The next global health crisis is going to be the ultimate stress test for this new, smaller version of the agency. And all of that brings us to the final big question. The entire map of global health, the power, the money, it's been completely redrawn. The debates about who's in charge and who's responsible are still raging, but as all this dust settles, the one question that really matters is, who is ultimately going to pay the price?